Ever since we first saw Navia in the 4.0 Fontaine trailer, many players had huge expectations for her to save GEO, but she did not. Don't get me wrong, Navia is an excellent DPS unit, but it kinda feels like she is great despite her element, not because of her element. And when it comes to saving GEO, I think many players were hoping for a unit that makes GEO itself as an element better, as in something that makes including GEO on your team valuable because of the value the element itself provides, not just the character themselves being so good that you bring them despite their element not contributing anything. Unlike every other element in the game, you never look at a GEO character and want to include them in your team because of their element. Other elements are able to either enable or trigger reactions, or provide other utility like a Nemo with grouping and VV shred, and the only utility that GEO has is its only reaction, Crystallize, and the Archaic Petra set. Ideally, for GEO to be saved, it should have reacted with Dendro, but it doesn't, and now there's basically a 0% chance Hoya will ever add a GEO Dendro reaction. Ideally, Crystallize could also get directly buffed, but GEO was already directly buffed once, so I have no hope for it to ever get buffed again. So that leaves us where we are now, hoping for a GEO character themselves to somehow fill the shoes of saving GEO. But what could a character possibly do to save GEO? Saving the element as a whole is basically impossible for one character to do, but we can get new GEO characters that make excellent use of their element, so a part of the reason you include them on the team is actually because of their element, and not just because their kit itself is great. As I mentioned, GEO's only utility is Crystallize and Archaic Petra, so for a GEO character to fill these shoes, they would ideally make great use of both of these. Navia actually comes pretty close to doing this. She is primarily an on-field DPS, but she can be played as a quick swap sub-DPS. In this role, she's able to provide a consistent stream of Crystallized shards, which can act as a form of interruption resistance for your on-field character, and her skill also pulls in Crystallized shards, allowing her to use the Archaic Petra set to buff your team without having to manually pick up the shards, which is the biggest problem with that set. This is great, but because Navia does take a lot of field time, and aside from these two things, the only other thing she's providing is personnel damage, and there are very few teams where using her like this is actually good, and even in those few teams, there isn't much reason to use her over other options. So that brings us to the main character of today's video, Chiori. In the current Fontaine event, we met Chiori, and she clearly has a visible GEO vision, so she is another GEO character likely coming out sometime in patch 4.x. For fun, I want to theorize on what type of kit she could or should have that would make her a unit that you include on teams not only because her kit is good, but also because she is GEO. One role that no GEO unit has yet is being a good healer that doesn't need to be on field to heal. Noelle heals, but you have to both use her burst and spend extensive field time on her, so she can basically only be used as a main DPS and not an actual support. Goro heals at C4, but it's small, only heals one character, and has 8 seconds of downtime, and is behind an 80 cost burst. I think Chiori having a strong team right heal by casting either her burst or her skill, and also giving her a consistent and reliable source of off-field GEO application, and making her pull Crystallized shards towards you, sort of like how Navia and Goro do, would be perfect. Being a team right healer would give her value in Farina teams, which are the best teams in the game right now, but she would be facing competition with every other healer option Farina teams already have. And Chiori being GEO would actually be what makes her competent against those other healer options. So since she would have a consistent source of off-field GEO application, you would have a consistent stream of Crystallized shards, letting her act both as a healer and a micro shielder at the same time, think similar to Baizu. And then, if she is pulling the crystals so that you don't have to manually pick them up, she would be a very reliable buffer with Archaic Petra, and 35% damage bonus to Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo to the entire team is no joke. Just by giving Chiori these simple things in her kit, in my opinion, would make her a high A tier or possibly even a low S tier support. and she would be great largely in part because of her element, rather than being great despite her element like most GEO characters. But just to help her out a bit more and make her even more unique, I would have Chiori have unique buffs of her own that she provides the team with, depending on what element she triggers Crystallize for. Similar to how Wanderer gets unique buffs that correlate with the theme of the element he swirls, but with Chiori, have it be a team-wide buff rather than just a personal buff. So for example, if she triggers Pyro Crystallize, give the team, say, a 15% attack buff, Hydro Crystallize, 15% HP, Cryo Crystallize, 10% crit rate, Electro Crystallize, 15% energy recharge. The values could be higher or lower, or different from the examples I listed. That's just to give you an example of what I'm envisioning in my head. But yeah, I think making Chiori a team-wide Geo healer that can act as a micro shielder with Crystallize, buffer with Petra, and some minor buffing of her own would be an absolutely incredible kit. I love Chiori's design and her character based off what we've seen in the event so far, and I really hope Hoyo gives her a cool and unique kit that would make us include her on the team because of her element and not despite her element. She's a character that I'm really hoping I will be able to justify including on a lot of my teams. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. If you liked today's video, please be sure to give a like and subscribe, and comment down below letting me know your thoughts. Thanks. Bye.